Hello, I'm Janvi, and I've worked on this presentation alongside Cohen and Khalid about the secondary succession in Point Pleasant Park, explaining 2 decades of forest change.
I would like to start this presentation by saying that Dalhousie University operates in the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqey, and the Passamaquoddy peoples. These nations hold inherent rights as the original people of these lands, and the Peace and Friendship Treaties, along with Section 35 of the Constitution Act, affirm their Aboriginal and treaty rights. Our project today will focus on Point Pleasant Park, which is a major big urban forest in Halifax. It's well known for its mixed Acadian forests and long history of human use, which makes it a very critical and important ecological and cultural site. In the year 2003, a major hurricane that goes by the name Hurricane 1 caused severe damages in this park, knocking out the majority of the mature trees. This event dramatically changed the landscape and essentially reset large parts of the forests. Because of this disturbance, the park became a very strong example of ecological succession. It allows us to observe how species return, how communities shift, and how forests naturally recover after a major disturbance. The database we're using include measurements of species presence, abundance, and diversity collected after the hurricane hit the park. The purpose of our project is to analyze these data to understand how Point Pleasant Park has been recovering and what patterns of succession are emerging. The objective of this presentation is to understand and compare the changes in the ecosystem of Point Pleasant Park following Hurricane 1. The first question that we have is, how has the forest community changed over time? And the hypothesis for that question that we have is, after Hurricane 1, the forest will slowly recover by having more trees, different species, and a mature community. The second question that we have is, how has the dominant species densities before and after the hurricane changed over time? And the hypothesis that we have is, the species richness will reach a plateau and or decrease. The third question that we have is, how has the chosen community metric changed over time? And the hypothesis for that question that we have is, both the red spruce and red maples will have increased in densities following the hurricane.
The data was collected by past students of Biology 2060 at 6 different sites, mapped as shown in the image in Point Pleasant Park in Halifax, Nova Scotia. These sites were chosen as they were the areas most disturbed by Hurricane 1. This data was measured from 2014 to 2025 by past students, and measurements were also recorded between 2004 and 2014, but they were only taken at 4 to 5 sites. Each site of 20 meters by 20 meters was divided into 4 quadrants, each of which were marked multiple times by quadrant markers to measure species richness and DBH, diameter, breadth, and height. Species richness and diversity were measured by estimating percent coverage for every species that was identified within each quadrant. DBH was measured using tape measures, measuring 5 feet above ground and tightly pulling the tape over the 5-foot line to record the breadth. The data was later analyzed using linear regression analysis because it allows us to compare 2 variables and their correlation with each other, time in years, and tree density and species richness in this case.
After the disturbance, tree abundance decreased a lot, which is one of the biggest changes that we can see in the forest. Hurricane 1 basically reset succession and gave pioneer species the chance to dominate, even though the overall species richness stayed similar. The actual species composition shifted. Some dominant species are still present, but their abundance has changed over time. Canopy development is progressing and different parts of the park are recovering at different rates. The disturbance also created strong spatial heterogeneity, and now environmental microsites like differences in light, soil, and moisture play a bigger role in shaping vegetation patterns. Overall, the forest community has changed a lot significantly since 2003. The graph on the right below shows this clearly, as the total tree density has steadily increased over the years, which matches the pattern of succession and ongoing forest recovery.
I'm going to examine the past, current, and future trends of the most dominant species in 2025, the red maple tree, as well as the most dominant species of 2004, the red spruce tree. As you can see in the graph to the right, the density of red maple trees in Point Pleasant Park has exploded since 2004, especially when we note the initial density of 0 at that time. This indicates a quick rise to maturity in the species and rapid reproductive cycles that could account for the meteoric rise to a peak average density across sites of 69.5 in 2017. Since then, we have seen a sizable decline in the average density and arrived at a somewhat stable level of roughly 30 individuals per 400 square meters. This large rise, fall, and more stable state is highly comparable to the chart below, demonstrating the expected biomass change as the species exits its post-disturbance exponential growth period and surpasses the carrying capacity of the ecosystem. In the near future, we can reasonably expect a slight decline as the red maples move through the transition phase and settle into the steady state phase. To predict the future density of red spruces, we need to understand their niche within the ecosystem of Point Pleasant Park. A small but substantial number of trees survived the hurricane, giving the potential for fast recolonization as they can skip the progression to maturity and begin spreading seeds right away. Despite this, the increase of red spruce is slow and steady, especially when compared to the red maples. This is likely due to the life strategy of the species, which can live for upwards of 200 years and consequently suffers the developmental trade-off of a majority energy allocation away from rapid reproduction. Based on this, we can guess that the red spruce is a slow but highly competitive species able to continue rising in density despite the booming and falling population of red maples. In time, we can expect it to stabilize as it finally nears the carrying capacity in the.
The community metric chosen for this study is species richness. As seen in the graph, species richness between the years 2004 and 2008 had dropped at first, leaving the few species that were there to colonize the space very quickly, even as the site was still in shock from the hurricane. From 2008 onwards, there seems to be a steady rise of species as time goes on, showing a steady recovery from the effects of the hurricane. This is to be expected in early succession. As time went on, more species established some competition as the soil conditions improved and the shade increases. There are a few reasons as to why species richness may have increased, and these reasons could work together or separately. Since there was plenty of light source available due to the empty space, this allowed more plants to be able to get sunlight to thrive in that area. In similar context, the open ground allowed for plants to colonize that area much easier and quicker in order to optimize spread. The destruction also meant that there was a massive reduction in competition, which allowed for other plants to grow much easier. The prediction for what the species richness may look like in the future is that there is a very real possibility for the richness to level off and plateau, or even possibly decline with the increase in competition causing other species to die out.
By examining multiple measurements taken across Point Pleasant Park, we can get a better impression of the overall progress of succession since 2004. Starting with species richness, we can see a steady increase up to 2018 and subsequent decline continuing up to the present year. This rise and fall in species richness likely means a number of species are being outcompeted for resources, something that generally only happens when the resource base is heavily reduced from its post-disturbance high, and where species must now vie after the same resources. But before we continue, let's put a pin in this for a moment and examine two more measures taken from within the. Looking at the diameter of breast height and total density of the area, we notice a stability from years 2021 to 2025. The stable density and diameter indicates that the space and resources in the environment have been pushed to the limit and have remained there. When we take this information of a stable density and tree diameter within the park, and then pair it with the rise and fall in species richness, it paints a clear picture of late succession. Barring any large-scale alterations or effects to the environment, we can expect that the park will continue to near the end of its secondary succession after Hurricane 1. Being in an urban area, the park faces factors that many other forests do not. One of these difficulties is the low large animal activity due to the park's isolated urban location. Native Halifax species like the low bush blueberry, which have seeds spread by animals, face issues as they can't rely on these animals to migrate through the area. Secondly, the park has frequent foot traffic, which compacts the soil and makes it difficult for geophytes, plants with modified underground structures, to grow. An example being the wild leek, another species native to the Halifax region. Purpose of further recovery and care in Point Pleasant Park, it's important to understand and remember First Nations knowledge, like that of what roughly translates to all my relations. Put simply, it means that every part of the environment has its place and role among those other parts and should be allowed to fulfill their natural role. In the context of a park, that can mean allowing nature to run its course and allow wood to decompose rather than removing it for aesthetic appeal, as this deprives the park of nutrients that could be returned to the system. We want to thank Joanna, Jenny, Dalhousie University, as well as the many other students and instructors that have helped gather data from Point Pleasant Park. As well, we would like to thank SlidesGo, Flaticon, and FreePic for the presentation template.
So the first question that we have presented by the TAE is, how do you think the management strategies of Point Pleasant Park should adapt to increase resistance of hurricane due to climate change? So essentially, to adapt to more frequent hurricanes caused by climate change, Point Pleasant Park should focus more on building a resilient forest, and that can include planting a mix of native species that can handle strong winds, reducing large areas of single species stands, and keeping a healthy age mix of young and old trees. The park should also maintain deadwood and fallen logs because they can support the regeneration and protect the soil after storms. On top of that, management should monitor vulnerable areas, improve drainage where flooding happens, and make trails and infrastructure which makes the future storms way safer when it comes to their effect on the species in the forest. Overall, the goal is to create a forest that can bend and that can recover and regrow, even if hurricanes became more of a concern and became more frequent.
The second question asked us whether animals play a role in succession, and the answer is a resounding yes. Animals have always played their role in every part of the ecosystem, so they definitely play a big role in succession and how ecosystems change over time. Firstly, they move seeds around whenever they eat fruit via feces deposition, causing new plants to arise in different areas. This can also happen when the seed itself can attach onto the animals, like pollen onto bees or burdock onto fur. They even graze plants, which herbivores usually do, which can slow down the population of a plant species and whether or not it can dominate that area. They even disturb soil by either digging, burrowing, or simply trampling it. This can create openings for possible new plants to grow. Every trophic level plays a role in succession, not just producers and primary consumers. Predators can control the herbivore population and can heavily affect the growth of plants in that given area, usually positively for the plants. Decomposers play one of the most underrated roles in the ecosystem. They break down dead matter. Basically, they take whatever no one wants, and it benefits everyone. The image on the side is given as a reference on the different trophic levels, and as you can see, the composers are taking from every trophic level.
Our third question was, did Point Pleasant Park's geographic location have an impact on how it was affected by Hurricane Juan in comparison to other forests of Nova Scotia? The short answer is yes, but let's break down why. To understand why, let's take a look at the park's geographic location and the path of the hurricane. As we can see using the bright red arrows, the park was in the near direct path of the hurricane and was contacted very shortly after landfall, before the hurricane was slowed down moving across land. Add this to the incredibly wind-exposed position of the park on the edge of the Halifax Harbor, and it's easy to see why it was damaged as much as it was. Now, let's take another look at another example of a forest in Nova Scotia. Circled above is Kejimkujik National Park, traditional home of the Mi'kmaq and another one of Nova Scotia's Acadian forests. Due to its distance away from the center of the hurricane and the windbreak granted from the kilometers of trees, it received noticeably less damage than the hurricane when compared to Point Pleasant Park. This means it would have had less disturbance in Point Pleasant Park and would have experienced less change in metrics such as species density and richness.